Hello Internet! This is your friendly neighborhood cat mom coming to you from her cat-infested house. You're very welcome. Would you like some tea? Are you comfortable? Great. Let's begin, shall we?
I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world, life in plastic.
Okay, so let me explain to you where this video comes from. I wanted to do something Barbie related because of the Margot Robbie movie that's coming out soon, as a kind of homage because I'm hyped for that movie. But I didn't want to do something just completely uninteresting to me just for clout. So I started thinking about Barbie movies that I saw as a kid. And something started poking at the corners of my mind. I remembered pretty dresses and glowing trees. You read the title of the video, you know what it is. It's Barbie and the 12 Dancing Princesses. That's an annoying word to say. Princesses, 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 princesses. Did I get it right? I feel like I said that in like 5 different accents.
That is your creation.
Come on, Barbie, let's go party.
I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie.
Here's the basic plot of the movie. The king's daughters are not like the other girls. They like bugs, reading books, horseback riding, playing cricket without any grass, walking on stilts. Just quirky girl things. The king loves it. He thinks they're great, but thanks to some random royal envoy who sounds like a bad Dracula impression,
I am authorized by my courageous king.
he uninvites the girls from a ball, and the king starts thinking that maybe if the girls want to participate in royal life, they have to tone it down a little bit. Like, you know, not playing cricket inside the freaking castle. Also, Genevieve, who is the Barbie character, she has a crush on the handsome cobbler. Okay, who cares? But because the king loves them so much, he can't bring himself to discipline them. And so to educate them properly, he calls in this cousin of his called Evelina? No, that's not it. Hagadora. No, that's not it either. Witchabella? Rowena. That's it. She arrives in this broke-ass carriage, letting us know that she is indeed broke. She has this devoted valet called Desmond and a monkey called Brutus. Because apparently monkeys are in this year.
Pirates are in this year?
Or hairless demons, I guess. I know that he's supposed to be a mean monkey, but damn, that might be the ugliest animated animal I've ever seen. Anyway, Rowena is evil. Who would have guessed? And she despises the girls' quirky interests. So she takes away their stuff and forces them all to wear gray, to personally confuse me. There are enough characters in this movie, you don't need to make them all wear the same thing. But at least she teaches them important skills for life as a ruler, such as fanning yourself properly. This and the Princess Diaries. What is it with princesses and freaking fans? Anyway, they're bummed out. Evelina won't even allow them to properly celebrate the birthday of the younger triplets because she hates singing and dancing. Okay, I guess she's from that town in Footloose then. But they still managed to give the younger girls the storybooks that their late mother had made them before she passed away. She had made one for each daughter, all telling the same story, the story of the dancing princess, and how she was able to access this magical realm where she could dance all night. Suddenly, they realized that the covers of their books all have flowers, and those are the same flowers they have on the floor of their shared bedroom. So they start getting some ideas. They decide to try and dance on the flowers in the order that the daughters were born, since each princess has a corresponding flower. And with the instructions of the storybook, they make it work. They manage to open up a portal that leads them to a mysterious underground realm. There they find a golden castle, trees with silver and golden leaves, flowers that grant wishes. The castle leads into a harbor. The harbor has this magic boat that takes them to an equally magical island. They ask the flowers to play them music and are able to dance to their heart's content. They all dance ballet because I guess little girls like ballerinas. And then Lacey, Lacey falls down and cuts herself. She's Kelly. I'll just call her Kelly, okay? Barbie takes Kelly to a fountain and washes the cut for her. Turns out that the water there is magic and instantly heals her cut. Holy shit! They're bringing that to their kingdom, right? Right? No. Obviously not. Kelly is the only one who even considers using it later, and she takes a little vial of it, and even then it's just in case that she falls down again. I guess they haven't learned yet that they're supposed to care about their people since their tutor prioritized the important art of fanning. They keep coming back. Meanwhile, Evelina is poisoning the king's tea. Once again, we're talking about M-word attempts here. What the hell? Genevieve even saw her buying poison out of some shady guy, so she asks the cobbler guy to go and investigate. The only pour she knows. But then Evelina finds out that they have been dancing all night somewhere because she finds their worn shoes under their beds. And she is concerned about that because they might be off somewhere dancing with princes. And if they meet someone, fall in love, get married, they might ascend to the throne. And she doesn't want that to happen because she wants to trick the king into making her queen instead of his dumb daughters. Eventually, Evelina tricks them into thinking that their father is actually burdened by them, so the girls decide to hide in the magic realm for a few days. Unfortunately, this is just as the cobbler found out that Evelina is poisoning the king, so he goes to find them and manages to access the magic realm because, I don't know, something to do with shoe wax? And the effing monkey sees him and shows Evelina how to get into the portal as well. She snags a magic flower and destroys the portal, so the girls get trapped in there with... I'll just call him Ken. They get trapped in there with Ken. Ken and Barbie realize that, for some reason, if they dance together, they can float on air and get everyone out of there. Yes, ballet. A normal thing that cobblers know how to do. Also, that seems like a safety concern. What if they didn't have a man with them? Would they have just been trapped there forever? And then they just drop on the audience that they will never be able to come back because in the story, the princess only managed to go to the magic realm 3 times. Okay, why didn't they just say that when the girls were reading the story before? Whatever, I'm thinking too hard. It's not that deep. They managed to give their dad the last of the healing water, so he is cured of the poisoning. And they used that magic wish-granting flower that Evelina had snagged to curse her into dancing forever. The end. There's a random helicopter behind my house. Can you guys leave? They feel like staying. So if there are helicopter noises in the back, I apologize. I thought this movie was kind of weird. Even as a kid, like it gave off ancient folklore vibes. That kind of story where the plot doesn't necessarily have to make sense, you know? And some of the details were just so weirdly specific that I was sure it had to be based on something else. That's why I was kind of fascinated by it and watched it several times, even though I thought the movie itself was kind of boring. That and the dresses were really, really pretty. And then I completely forgot about it because I became a not like other girls teenager and I couldn't like anything that was pink or girly, obviously. Years later, I read a book, I know I'm cultured like that, called Wildwood Dancing. And that book had some familiar plot points. Several princesses that ran away from their room at night in order to go dance in the fairy realm. And they did that in order to escape their stifling life amongst the nobility with all its rules. A great book, by the way. Go read it if you're into that kind of folklore. But it sounds familiar, doesn't it? The book and the Barbie movie had to be based on the same thing. And that nagged at me. For months, I would remember that and be like, okay, I have to look it up later. And then completely forget about it later. And then something magical happened. I made a YouTube channel. So I had the perfect excuse both to make Barbie content and to indulge my random curiosity.
Trust me everywhere, imagination, that is your creation.
Finding out what they were based on was relatively simple. It was a German folktale called The 12 Dancing Princesses. Oh, okay. That was kind of underwhelming. I thought for sure that at least the title had to be a Barbie creation because it's so sickeningly sweet, you know? But no, the title is pretty old. It was one of the first recorded titles for the story, but not the first. The first one, at least according to the Brothers Grimm, was The Shoes That Were Danced to Pieces. Pretty dramatic, huh? I actually like this title much more, and I'll explain why later. But for now, let us read the story that had intrigued me for years. The shoes that were danced to pieces. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 12 daughters, each one more beautiful than the others. They slept together in one room where their beds stood next to each other. At night, when they were lying there, the king closed their door and barred it. However, when he opened it the next morning, he saw that their shoes had been danced to pieces. No one could determine how it had happened. Then the king proclaimed that whoever could discover where they went dancing each night could choose one of them for his wife and become king after his death. However, anyone who attempted this but failed to make the discovery after 3 days and nights would forfeit his life. A prince soon presented himself, offering to undertake the venture. He was well received, and that evening was taken to a room adjacent to the bedroom. A bed was made for him there, and he was told to watch where they went and danced. So that they would not be able to do anything in secret or go out to some other place, the door to their room was left open. However, the prince's eyes felt heavy as lead, and he fell asleep. When he awoke the next morning, the 12 had been dancing, for their shoes all had holes in their soles. The same thing happened the second and third evenings, and his head was chopped off without mercy. Many others came to try this risky venture, but they all, too, lost their lives. Now it happened that a poor soldier, who was wounded and could no longer serve in the army, was making his way to the city where the king lived. An old woman met him and asked where he was going. "I'm not exactly sure myself," he said, then jokingly added, "But I would like to discover where the princesses are dancing their shoes to pieces and then become king." "That is not so difficult," said the old woman. "Do not drink the wine that they will bring you in the evening." Then she gave him a cloak and said, "When you put this on, you will become invisible, and you can follow the 12. Having received this good advice, the soldier became serious, took heart, and went to the king, and announced himself as a suitor. He, like the others, was well received and was given royal clothes to wear. That evening, at bedtime, he was escorted to the anteroom. Just as he was going to bed, the oldest princess brought him a goblet of wine. However, he had tied a sponge beneath his chin and let the wine run into it, drinking not a single drop himself. He lay down and after a little while began to snore as if he were in the deepest sleep. The 12 princesses heard him and laughed. The oldest one said he could have spared his life as well. Then they got up, opened their wardrobes, chests, and closets, took out their best clothes, and made themselves beautiful in front of their mirrors, all the time jumping about in anticipation of the dance. Only the youngest one said, "I'm not sure. You are all very happy, but I'm afraid that something bad is going to happen." "You snow goose," said the oldest one. "You are always afraid. Have you forgotten how many princes have been here for nothing? I wouldn't even have had to give this soldier a sleeping potion. He would never have woken up." When they were ready, they first approached the soldier, but he did not move at all. And as soon as they thought it was safe, the oldest one went to her bed and knocked on it. It immediately sank beneath the floor, and they all climbed down through the opening, one after the other, the oldest one leading the way. The soldier saw everything, and without hesitating, he put on the cloak and followed after the youngest one. Halfway down the stairs, he stepped on her dress. Frightened, she called out, "Who's there? Who's holding my dress?" "Don't be so stupid," said the oldest one. "You just caught yourself in a hook." They continued until they came to a magnificent walkway between 2 rows of trees. Their leaves were all made of silver, and they shone and glistened. The soldier thought to himself, "You'd better take some proof," and he broke off a twig. A loud cracking sound came from the tree. The youngest one called out again, "It's not right. Didn't you hear that sound?" The oldest one said, "That's just a joyful salute. They are firing because soon we will have disenchanted our princess." Then they came to a walkway where the trees were all made of gold, and finally to a third one where they were all made of clear diamonds. He broke a twig from each one of these. The cracking sound frightened the youngest one each time, but the oldest one insisted that it was only the sounds of joyful salutes. They continued on until they came to a large body of water. 12 boats were there. In each boat sat a handsome prince, waiting for them. Each prince took a princess into his boat. The soldier sat next to the youngest princess, and the prince said, I don't know why the boat is so much heavier today. I have to row with all my strength in order to make it go. It must be the warm weather, said the youngest princess. It's too hot for me as well. On the other side of the water, there was a beautiful, brightly illuminated castle. Joyful music, kettle drums, and trumpets sounded forth. They rowed over and went inside. Each prince danced with his princess. The invisible soldier danced along as well, and whenever a princess held up a goblet of wine, he drank it empty as she lifted it to her mouth. This always frightened the youngest one, but the oldest one silenced her every time. They danced there until 3 o'clock the next morning, when their shoes were danced to pieces and they had to stop. The princess rowed them back across the water. This time the soldier took a seat next to the oldest princess in the lead boat. They took their leave from their princess on the bank and promised to come back the next night. When they were on the steps, the soldier ran ahead and got into bed. When the 12 tired princesses came in slowly, he was again snoring so loudly that they all could hear him. "We are safe from him," they said. Then they took off their beautiful clothes and put them away, placed their worn-out shoes under their beds, and went to bed. The next morning, the soldier said nothing, for he wanted to see the amazing thing once again. He went along the second and third nights, and everything happened as before. Each time they danced until their shoes were in pieces. The third time, he also took a goblet as a piece of evidence. The hour came when he was to give his answer, and he brought the 3 twigs and the goblet before the king. The 12 princesses stood behind the door and listened to what he had to say. The king asked, "Where did my daughters dance their shoes to pieces?" He answered, "In an underground castle with 12 princes." Then he told the whole story and brought forth the pieces of evidence. The king summoned his daughters and asked them if the soldier had told the truth. Seeing that they had been betrayed and that their denials did no good, they had to admit everything. The king asked him which one he wanted for a wife. He answered, "I am myself no longer young, so give me the oldest one." Their wedding was held the same day, and the kingdom was promised to him following the king's death. But the princess? They had as many days added to their curse as they had spent nights dancing with the 12 princesses. Kind of a grim ending. I'm sorry. If it's any comfort, I don't think I'm funny either. Anyway, the story is quite different from the Barbie movie, which is expected, but not as different as I thought it would be. There are granular details that they kept that they really didn't have to if their goal was just to make a sparkly distraction for little girls. For example, the princesses don't have a mother. And I know that in the wake of Disney's tendency to axe moms, that's not a big deal, but regardless, it's something they kept. There are more specific details though. The portal to the magic realm opens on the princess's bedroom floor. It's an underground realm, which is pretty unique. They are all unmarried, which, since it's Barbie, doesn't really surprise me. Like, little kids don't want to hear stories about boring married adults after all, which, since I'm about to become one, fair enough. Once there, the trees are made of gold and silver, just like in the story, and the instruments play by themselves. In both versions, they're found out because of their tethered shoes that were hidden under the beds. That's why I prefer the shoes that were danced to pieces as a title. It's an important detail of the story, and it's also a more intriguing title. Lastly, the man who gets to marry one of them isn't a nobleman, but rather a simpleton who just happened to crack their secret. This tells me that whoever wrote this movie clearly had some love for the original tale and wanted to give like a knowing nod for other people familiar with it. And I understand them. This story is really enchanting. It clearly has ties to Fae folklore with the magical realm and cursed princes. But it's also a little cryptic. Most myths have some kind of moral or teaching that they're trying to convey, and I've even found references that imply that the Brothers Grimm were specifically looking for stories that reflected German values. So, what values are being reflected here? Don't let princesses drink wine? I thought I might find some answers if I looked a little bit into the history of the Brothers Grimm and how they collected their fairy tales. And what I found was so interesting. Firstly, did you know that they were German? I kinda gave that one away, but I really didn't expect that. I don't know, for some reason, I think Hollywood brainwashed me into conflating European fairy tales with British accents. So I assume that they must be from somewhere in the UK, or maybe like Irish. But no, German. Oh. Anyway, where did those fairy tale telling Germans come from? Things weren't easy for them at first. Their father died when Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm were 11 and 10, respectively, so not an easy start. They had once been middle class, but without their father's income, they were straight up poor. The Napoleonic Wars sure didn't help either. They had to take care of their family, but despite that, they still managed to pursue some lofty career goals. Jacob served in the Hessian War Commission, which sounds very fancy, and Wilhelm graduated law school. But they failed. They both ended up as librarians. And that's what they were when their mother died and they became responsible for their 4 younger siblings. Jacob at 23 and Wilhelm at 22. To cite Mike's Mike, we all flop at age 23. Damn, I'm still flopping at age 26, so maybe I shouldn't have been that glib about their failed career ambitions. Even because, while working as librarians, they both became accomplished philologists. If, like my uncultured ass, you don't know what that is, it's basically the study of written records, their authenticity, meaning, and origin. They published several studies on medieval literature, shifts in the sound of the German language, and even a German dictionary. You know, now I'm actually kind of jealous of them. That sounds really cool, but you can see how that background would help them with what came next. Right when their mom died, so 1808, their friend, romantic poet Clemens Brentano, asked them to collect folk stories for a book of fairy tales. This was big shock number 2 for me. They're the most famous fairy tale guys in the world, and collecting them wasn't their idea? Like, what? That's insane! They still did all of the work collecting the fairy tales, so it's not like they didn't do anything, but still, I was shocked. In 1810, they sent their friend 54 texts and kept a copy. And then, f***ing Clemens lost their manuscript. I can just imagine them going like, "Holy shit, Clemens, really? We worked on that for like 2 years, man." I have to say though, familiar as I am with artists, that tracks. My headcanon is that they were kind of pissed at Clemens and that's why they decided to go ahead and publish the collection without him. It had grown to 86 stories by then, which they published in 1812. And then another 70, which they published in 1815. These weren't kids' books, by the way. They intended them to be a more adult academic read. Which explains some things, such as the casual M-word of several princes in the shoes that were danced to pieces.
His head was chopped off without mercy.
What drew them to this topic was believing that their modern literature was somehow artificial. That the kind of culture that really mattered were those more simple, unstructured stories that held communities together, that reflected people's lives and their values. Besides that, they were nationalists. They were trying to create a unified German mythos. I agree, to some extent, but the presumption that anything modern that has been structured and worked upon is less valuable because it didn't come to be organically doesn't sit right with me. They manage to be more complex and sometimes even reflect the same themes as those simpler stories, but in a more curated way that ends up having even more impact. Regardless, let's get back to German. Let's get back to German. Regardless, let's get back to Jacob and Wilhelm. They couldn't imagine how popular their books were about to get. At the time, the only book that had sold more in Germany than theirs was the Bible. And with fame came criticism. They didn't intend their books to be for kids, sure, but the fact that it was called Children and Household Tales probably gave some people, or likely a lot of people, the wrong impression. And parents complained that some tales were too gruesome or scary for kids. So they toned it down a little bit in future editions. Another group that was kind of upset was the Catholics. Some of their stories were a little too pagan for their tastes. For example, did you know that the witch that stole Rapunzel from her parents was originally a fairy? I know, I was surprised too. But the more I thought about it, it made sense. The Fae are very morally ambiguous in folklore, mostly villains really. The whole concept of changelings is that fairies would steal babies and leave one of their own in the baby's place. So why wouldn't one of them steal a baby girl and stick her in a tower? But that's a no-no for the church. Fairies are obviously pagan nonsense. Witches, on the other hand, are obviously real. They're everywhere, haven't you heard? As to how much of the changes were in response to the backlash, that's debatable. For instance, the original book's accounts weren't all straight from the mouths of the people. There is evidence that they got most of the stories from fellow scholars who had themselves heard the stories from simpletons. I almost said feral scholars there. That's a good band name. Guys, it's not because you used to be poor that you can't still be snobs.
I should wash your mouth out with soap and water, who really leave a great deal to be desired.
Anyway, it seems that they then edited the tales to sound more authentically rustic. That's icky, not gonna lie. So, how edited were these future versions of the stories? Well, after the collections became a hit, a lot of people came straight to the Grimms with their tales, both tales that they hadn't published yet and different versions of the ones they had. In some cases, they just replaced the old versions with more child-friendly or church-friendly ones that they had heard later. But there was definitely some censoring. Some stories were entirely omitted for being considered not German enough, or simply too scary. The language that they used in their later books was also a little bit more flowery, which is what we currently associate with fairy tales. But, what were we talking about again? Oh yeah, we were trying to work out the themes in the 12 Dancing Princesses. Well, the background of the Brothers Grimm didn't help at all. It was a complete waste of time. Okay, that might be a little too harsh. I like learning about random things. Also, we did find out that they intended the tales to be a reflection of the German people and their values. So, what German values can we pick up in this story? As you might be able to tell, I am not German, and neither is, as far as I know, John Betts, but I found their Jungian analysis of the story very helpful. For example, themes of people coming into wealth and prominence simply through their wits are common in folklore. Firstly, just for a matter of escapism, it's nice to imagine that you could escape your normal life and achieve all of your wildest dreams just for being clever enough. But also it reflected the values of the time. Street smarts and trickery were seen as worthy skills for people who didn't have a whole lot else going for them. But in this case, it's relevant that our hero isn't just a generic peasant, but a soldier, and a wounded soldier at that. As I alluded to before, the Napoleonic Wars were raging on at this time, and soldiers who could no longer fight due to injury and since they couldn't really work either, became vagrants, were very present in the collective German imagination. With this, you can clearly see the escapism angle. Since everybody knew someone who had been subjected to that, it was nice to imagine that they could achieve better life conditions under the right circumstances. It was also optimistic from a nationalistic standpoint. To a wounded nation ravaged by war, it was undoubtedly inspiring to hear and spread the story of a wounded fighter just like them, who had raised himself up by his bootstraps using his own wit and the wisdom of the older generation. And yeah, I think you could make a compelling case that the wise old woman in this story is a stand-in for the elders in the life of the listener, transmitting the idea that old people can, in fact, be wiser than you and help you out with knowledge that you might never acquire otherwise. Then there are the princesses. What's up with them? What values can you infer from drugging and indirectly murdering a bunch of princes so that you can keep dancing all night? There are a few things, surprisingly. First, what are they really doing here? They dance all night and sleep well into the day. Several young princes, and presumably a lot of shoes, are sacrificed so that they can continue their fun. It's wasteful, carefree behavior, right? Childish, even? I think we can interpret the way that they have been living their lives as a state of suspended childhood. None of them are married, perhaps because all of their marriage prospects keep getting K-worded in favor of their secret enchanted underground hoes. But anyway, even the eldest princess is the most oblivious to the possibility of them getting caught, even while it's actively happening. So when the soldier reveals their exploits, they are essentially forced to grow up. The eldest one marries him, and the other ones presumably have to face their futures and responsibilities. That even kind of explains why the poor enchanted hotties are punished by the end, because they were enabling the princesses to extend their childlike states. These all might be the reasons why this story was told and perpetrated, but these are not the reasons why I'm personally fascinated by it. What fascinates me here isn't what is said, the more sobering German values, but what isn't said. The kind of more pagan-y stuff that the Grimms didn't seem to want to elaborate on for some reason I can't possibly imagine. Where did the cursed princess come from? What is that other realm, and why do the princesses of all people get to access it? Who or what created that bejeweled wonderland where they dance through the night? What is the purpose of that realm? Why do they have to cross a lake to get to the magic castle? Is it some sort of Hades parallel? Or does something happen when they cross it? Some sort of further distancing from the human world? Seems like there's something missing here. A web of interconnected stories that ties all of this into a mythology. I want more, but there isn't. There isn't more. Not that anyone registered it anyway. That's the problem with this kind of distant, studious approach to preserving folk stories. If you're looking for tales to preserve, you preserve a tale, one piece of what probably is a tapestry of folklore. And the person telling you the story probably wouldn't even bother mentioning it because everyone already knows it. This kind of intentionally vague lore can be done on purpose in fiction in order to generate a sense of wonderment. For example, one of the reasons why I like Castle in the Sky by Studio Ghibli so much is the mystery of Laputa, the castle in the sky itself. What was that civilization like before it fell apart? What was the city like before it was covered in vegetation and abandoned? And I think the vagueness is part of the charm. It replicates the wonder a child feels when they're exploring abandoned ruins. Do most children explore abandoned buildings? Or was that just me? But that's not what's happening with the shoes that were danced to pieces. At least, I don't think so. I really think there used to be more here. But it was lost, removed from its context. Wait a second, you might be thinking. Wasn't this supposed to be about Barbie? Oh yeah, you're right.
Kiss me here, toss me there, hanky-panky.
You can touch, you can play.
I actually tricked you. I tricked you into hearing me babble about early German nationalism and folklore for however long I've been talking now. But seriously now, about the Barbie film, I was genuinely surprised by how much effort went into it. My memory of the movie was that it was super incoherent, so I was pleasantly surprised by how okay it was. They make a lot of effort to give all of the princesses distinct interests and personalities. They fail because there isn't enough time in a single movie to flesh out equally 12 different characters. But I still appreciate the effort. The animals aren't nearly as annoying as I remembered, and a lot of the music in the movie is genuinely good. Not to mention all of the intentional granular parallels that they make to the original story I mentioned earlier. That is a lot of effort. People tend to think about these Barbie movies as like soulless cash grabs. And sure, the quality could be higher, especially in the animation and script, but there is a lot of passion on display here. And let's be clear, it absolutely did not need to be there. They could have just slapped some pretty dresses into 12 identical molds and made them dance for an hour. So congratulations, guys, y'all did a good job. You could even argue that the original message about the importance of giving up your childish delights in order to grow up is still there. The princesses do leave their dancing retreat forever in order to save their father, after all. But I think the main takeaway here is about individuality. The importance of holding on to your interests and passions, even in the face of people who don't understand you and want you to fit into a generic mold. Which, as far as messages to little girls go, it's pretty good. I have nothing against that. But it's worth pointing out that this movie encourages a very specific subset of girls to be proud of their differences. Namely, white, conventionally attractive girls. So, I like this movie. It's much better than a lot of children's movies I have forced myself to watch. Liking animation is a pain sometimes. But that's not all. So if you know anything about Barbie movies, you might remember that a couple of the first ones were based on ballets. Specifically, Barbie in the Nutcracker and Barbie of Swan Lake. So watching this movie and seeing all of the intricate choreography and music, I started thinking, was this based on a ballet? I did find the answer in the form of a behind-the-scenes video. The choreographer, Peter Martins from the NYC Ballet, explained that all of it was an original creation because the 12 Dancing Princesses had never been made into a ballet before. But guess what? He was wrong! Honestly, I wish I had found this little behind-the-scenes moment a little sooner, because I spent a lot of time researching 90s and early 2000s ballets to see if this movie was based on any of them. And I did find a couple of things. The page says it's referring to a program/brochure, but like, there's no picture. So I think it's just a page registering the existence of a brochure? Whatever. And the Utah Junior Ballet, directed by Linda Fenton. Aside from that, I have no further information. So yeah, that guy from the Barbie behind the scenes video, that one guy, he was wrong. He was incorrect. Ha! The F am I doing with my life? Aside from that, the video is pretty standard. It's hosted by the ballerina who played Barbie for the dance scenes, and it shows a little bit of the motion capture process. It's also extremely funny to me. First, this girl, Maria Kurowski, she is so tired. She reads the script in the flattest tone I've ever heard, especially for kids content. And I'm not dragging her for it. She's a dancer. Most of her acting is based on technique, body language, and facial expressions. So she's not used to line reading. That's fine. But she's also so tired.
I think Princess Genevieve is great. She's confident, clever, and she has 11 sisters. Imagine 12 princesses.
There's this bit in the video where she tells us a little bit about her routine in the NYC Ballet Company. This is what she says. She walks to work, goes to her locker, puts on her ballet clothes, takes 1.5 hours of classes in the morning, comes back in the afternoon, stretches to prevent serious injury, begins her 10-minute process of wrapping her toes in tape and paper towels in order to prevent blisters, rehearses for 6 hours straight, goes to hair and makeup for 2 hours before the show, does the show, arrives home at 10:30 at night, and goes to sleep because she's so tired. Then she wakes up the next day to do it all again. That sounds miserable. Okay, I'm kind of joking here. I don't doubt that if you really love ballet, that's exactly what you want to be doing every day. But as someone who has never been involved in intense sports like that, I'm tired just thinking about it. And that, along with the weird monotone delivery and her insistence that if little girls work hard enough, they can achieve their dreams just like her. This was in the VHS tape. According to my mom, it's scary. It's funny scary, but it's scary. Don't try to bring the children into your weird ballet cult, lady. Finally, I applaud this movie for going beyond what it had to be, even if they were exploiting poor Maria. And I think it's so interesting to see the evolution of this story, from sociological study to random Barbie tie-in. And I find it fascinating that this story still managed to retain some of that mystique that made it interesting in the first place. That's what Child Marina was picking up on. I hope you guys liked it, and I hope you guys weren't too mad about being tricked into hearing me ramble about random things that interest me. This video was a little bit more analytical and research-driven than my normal stuff. My videos are normally just about analyzing pop culture that I love, but I want to do more videos like this in the future. So if you like this, make sure to follow me for more unhinged investigations into topics that catch my fancy. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to help me grow, share it if you love it, and take care, everyone. Bye!